Let's move on to other news now. The United Nations Children's Fund, that's UNICEF, says refugee women and children suffer routine sexual violence and abuse as they try to travel across the Mediterranean to Europe. That's in a report just released called A Deadly Journey for Children. UNICEF says 3/4 of children heading for Italy said they'd experienced violence at the hands of adults. Nearly half the women interviewed reported sexual abuse during their journey, often several times in different places along the route. Women and children also complained of harsh and overcrowded conditions in the Libyan detention centres, where many of them are held. Last year, more than 4,000 people died attempting to cross the Mediterranean from Libya. At least 700 of them were children. Well, we are joined now by Simon Ingrams in Brussels. He's a senior communications advisor at UNICEF. Mr. Ingrams, very good to have you with us on Al Jazeera. So the UNICEF report is into what it says are extreme risks facing refugee and migrant children making that journey from sub-Saharan Africa to Libya and on to Italy. We've gone over them in brief, but can you tell us more about the situation for them?
Thank you. Well, we always knew that the situation inside Libya was awful. I think what this report underlines is just the extent of how terrible it really is, and the different ways, horrific ways in many respects, that the people, men, women and a growing number of children are essentially preyed on by the traffickers, the smugglers and the militia who they encounter in the course of this perilous journey which many of them undertake as they travel from the very south of the country, being funneled from sub-Saharan Africa and then up through Libya overland until they reach eventually the Mediterranean. But along the way they experience all manner of different deprivations and dangers, violence, sexual abuse, imprisonment, forced labor. All of these, it amounts to a modern day slavery is what is essentially happening in Libya, and it really has to stop.
Well, how can it be stopped? How should authorities be protecting refugees, migrants against this abuse, especially when they're traveling along places where what they're doing is deemed illegal or breaking the law?
It's certainly not an easy situation given the political fragmentation inside Libya, the fact that you have no central government authority, it's divided between different power sources, you have numerous militia who control different patches of territory and are all determined to get their slice of this very lucrative trade in human misery, if you like, flooding across their country. However, there are ways in which we, the international community, can act, and our report is really a wake-up call to governments in Europe, but around the region as well, to put forward resources, funding, and apply themselves to improving conditions. For example, at the detention centres, something like 34 detention centres we've identified inside Libya where conditions are truly horrific. Hundreds and hundreds of people packed in with almost nothing to sustain them. No decent food, no medical care, no services of any kind. Now, if we, by working with the municipal authorities, the local authorities on the ground inside Libya, can create a network of alternative detention centres, not detention centres, reception centres, where children and women can be provided with the basic needs that they have, whether it's their health, food and medical care, but also education, things like that, then this will go a very long way to beginning to tackle the situation. And beyond that, we need to be looking at finding safe and legal ways in which people fleeing from the conflict and violence in their own countries can find a means of coming to Europe in a legal manner. That is something which virtually does not exist at the moment. We have to find new ways, better ways of accommodating that perfectly legitimate desire for people to flee persecution in their homeland.
And Mr. Ingrams, what do you say to criticism that the reception centres are not actually the answer to facilitating a way for refugees and migrants to escape the conditions that they're in?
Well, the important distinction is, as I tried to make that clear, is between a reception centre and a detention centre. These should not be places where people are imprisoned. That is effectively what is happening at the moment. But reception centres where services are provided, where people are helped and assisted on their journey, where they can receive protection from the groups who are trying to take advantage of them as they travel, that is something quite different. And that's something where we certainly can begin to make a difference as the cooperation, the level of intervention on the ground slowly expands inside Libya. It's going to take time, but it's a process which must be started.
Simon Ingrams, Senior Communications Advisor at UNICEF, joining us from Brussels there. Thank you very much for your time.